Hello again, everyone. So today we're going to be getting into European art and theater of the late 16th and early 17th centuries. We've got a lot of different stuff going on, so let's just get right into it. So we're going to talk about art first, and one of the movements that was very interesting at this time that developed was Mannerism. So Mannerism is an art movement that, at its core, what they were looking to was to express emotions like anxiety, uncertainty, suffering, some spiritual yearning, if you will, as well as do some different things in how they were going to depict these emotions. And they're really kind of the goal, trying to break down the principles of balance and harmony and modernity in general. But in trying to do that, they were actually ridiculed early on because a lot of people felt that they were just almost like trying to, or that they were just weaker copies, if you will, of the Renaissance. Like if you look on the picture of the right, the portrait of Rudolph II by Giuseppe Arcimboldo. I mean, this is a really interesting picture. So this is the concepts here are really deep. You know, you're taking these fruits and vegetables and natural objects and using those to depict a man. You know, so in this case, the kind of mannerism is that we're using such and such to depict the manner of this person. But the people who didn't like this stuff, what they often would do is basically said that they were just like copying the Renaissance guys, but they weren't as good at it. So someone who didn't like a mannerist painting will be, well, that was done in the manner of Michelangelo. And whereas today we might be like, oh, yeah, in the manner of Michelangelo. So that person took like, you know, the ideas of Michelangelo and that was his inspiration. Back then that was like a knock. It was like, you guys aren't good as the Renaissance guys, so that's why you're painting in the manner of them. But eventually people would get over that and realize these guys are doing really, really interesting things. And what they were doing is they're trying to deliberately create figures that were like out of proportion. They're really focusing on expressing these emotions, which I'll show you in the next couple pictures, as well as just being creative on how we can depict people and items and stuff like that, and doing things out of the box, again, like this picture that I have here on the right. Now, this would be a movement that would start in Italy and would start to move out of it. In fact, it was an Italian. It was not an Italian who was like kind of the pinnacle of this. It was a Greek, Dominikos Theotokopoulos, who is better known today as El Greco or the Greek. If you look at these two paintings that he has, Laocoon and the Burial of the Count of Orgaz, you know, look at the emotion here. You see kind of the sadness and the resignation of, you know, the Count dying here as he's being laid to rest, whereas you have up here that he is ascending into heaven, and you see all kind of the dynamic things that are going on. We've got our saints here, Jesus, Mary, you know, here's Peter because he's got keys, and, you know, keys to heaven. That's the reference there. It's the gatekeeper. But then over here on the left, we have a picture of Laocoon. You know, the story of Laocoon is he was one of the priests in Troy during the Trojan War, where when the horse was brought into Troy, he was the one that said, no, this is a trick. You got to get rid of it. And the gods, who had already agreed that Troy would have to fall, they send a series of serpents from the sea to come and kill Laocoon and his two sons. You can see that the serpents, you know, he's trying to deal with one. But again, if you look at these, like the figures here are very stretched out, so they're not necessarily perfect realism. They're not serene like you would often see in the Renaissance, where you get a lot of those pictures. What you have here is just this violent death and emotion of what was going on. And that was really what you had the Mannerists all about. But what was a little bigger at this time period was the Baroque period. Excuse me. The Baroque period, also starting in Italy at this time. Extremely popular with Catholics. I will explain why in a moment. And so what these guys were trying to do, or their effort, was to unite the classical ideas of the Renaissance with this renewal of religious revival in the 16th and the 17th centuries. And that is a direct result of the Protestant Reformation. Okay, more and more people are getting deeper into their religion. More and more people are getting, they're reading the Bible on their own. And so religious art is going to have more of a role. You're also going to get things that aren't religious. Don't get me wrong. So that's going to be really important as well. But religious paintings are going to be really crucial here. And a lot of the stuff, whether we see for the painting or the architecture, which we'll talk about, a lot of it is about often power and magnificence, and the paintings are just kind of like, oh my goodness, and you're also going to see some emotions and movements in these paintings, kind of like the Mannerists. These paintings in many cases are going to be very, very dynamic and intense, as I'll show you a variety of things there. But I like to think of the Baroque period as just this big and bold time period where we get lots of religious art and just so many different things going on at this time. So here's a great example by Peter Paul Rubens, who is a Flemish painter, and the title here, The Landing of Maria de' Medici at Marseille, when she was traveling from Italy to Marseille. And if you just look here, you just have so many things going on. You have the maidens who are seeing the ship land over here, and then you've got Marie herself and everybody bowing. I mean, you've got like an angel trumpeting or heralding her arrival. These deep colors, that's another thing that you're going to see in the Baroque period, nice deep colors. And so this was really kind of emblematic of the painting at that time. We also have big sculptures, and really one of the greatest sculptures in the history of the world. You have Gian Lorenzo Bernini. These two great pictures great sculptures. On the left, you have the Ecstasy of Saint Teresa, when Saint Teresa has the angels talk to her. You can look the story up on your own. And on the right, you have the Throne of St. Peter. This is in St. Peter's Cathedral in Rome. I mean, just the skill and the ability. But here you can almost see movement. The angel is coming down, and wind blowing, and you see all the fabric going here. And again, that power and magnificence that I was talking about. Look at just all of the carved figures in marble and the throne. And it's just really, really impressive. Now, in France, we're going to have some other things going on. This will become a new center of art and architecture. In the second half of the 17th century, France becomes a really big-time place for art. Early on, they kind of resisted that, and even though it's part of the Baroque period, their paintings were more reflective of the High Renaissance. But they were still big on like grandeur and stuff like that. Nicolas Poussin, as you see, this is his picture here on the right, danced to the music of time. And you can see this is a very Renaissance-y, that's not a word, but let's run with it. You see the different types of colors. You have a little baby like playing a flute or something over here. You've got an angel. You've got all, the heralds up here and everybody's dancing. I mean, really, really, there's a lot of stuff going on in here, and I'd say you could definitely call this like a grand picture. But that's kind of what we see going on with the French at this time. Okay. The Dutch people, however, will also be very big, and we saw them during the Renaissance as well, but with a strong economy and many different wealthy people, we're also going to see Dutch painters Dutch painters get the opportunity to have patrons. And much like we saw in Italy with the patron system, we are going to see this in the Netherlands as well, okay? And their focus is going to be much more on realism, okay? And the ideas of talking about portraits of individuals or groups and lots of landscapes and seascapes, as you see the picture here. So that's really going to be the focus of what the Dutch were doing, so a little bit different. And of the Dutch masters, one of the most well-known, and watch out, we do have a woman that has some really wonderful painting going on here. Judith Leister had her own career. She was independent of any men or anything like that. And this, again, was a big deal at the time. Okay, she was the first female member of the Order of the Guild of St. Luke in Harlem, which was absolutely huge. That had never happened before, and you can see her pictures here. That's her self-portrait on the left, and then the picture of the kids on the right, which is really kind of fun. Kids just having fun, and this was a huge deal. And I would be remiss also to also say, and I don't have it on here, but you can look her up a little bit. In Italy, you also had Artemisia Gentileschi, who was the first woman ever admitted to the Florentine Academy of Design. She's going to do a lot of impressive things as well. But the guy who is like the guy is, of course, Rembrandt. And Rembrandt van Rijn, we just go with Rembrandt, like Beyonce. He is the Titan. I mean, his paintings were deep and showed a lot of realistic things, but again, so many things going on. We see our deep colors, and you see the Night Watch. I mean, just scan the painting and see how many different things you're seeing going on here is really, really remarkable. He is of international acclaim at the time, but as is often the case sometimes, he wasn't good with money, he didn't necessarily understand things, and he actually ended up dying bankrupt. But his paintings will go on, and the Baroque period will influence others. But nonetheless, art was dynamic. It was still growing. It didn't just stop at the Renaissance. And I think what was really cool is it decided to go. Artists went in a different direction. It's like, yes, the Renaissance was great, but guys like Rembrandt are like, well, I don't want to paint like that. I have different ideas and different things that I want to see. And that's exactly what he did. And it was tremendously impactful. Okay, and here's another. I mean, and this is the anatomy lesson of Dr. Nicholas Tulp. I mean, this is a big thing. You see a corpse and learning how guys were learning medicine at the time, and we're going to be talking about that because that's going to be a big deal too. And just so much realism and depth in his paintings and subject matters that a lot of people never thought to do before. All right, theater, and I went R.E. Why? Because it's European, and that's just how we're going to do it. Theater, of course, is going to be huge, and the big-time influence of Shakespeare is evident, but that is just going to expand and grow theater even more. Okay, so for instance, just in London, there were 6 theaters that were open 6 days a week by this time period, which is huge. The big one was the Globe, which of course was made famous by Shakespeare, and it was a big open-air theater that held 3,000 plus people, and it was really, this was the one that was kind of open for just about anyone. And then you had the Blackfriars Theater, which was a roofed theater. I'll show you a picture of that as well, which is a little bit tighter, but that was more for like upper class people. Like, so for instance, the Globe only charged a penny or two, which made theater like very popular with the commoners, which will really help it take off, whereas Blackfriars were more expensive. And you see that today. If you want to go out to a theater experience, there's really, really inexpensive theaters, and there's really expensive ones, so you can see a little bit otherwise. And acting troupes become like the big thing. Okay, you have groups like Lord Chamberlain's Men, who Shakespeare was actually a part of that, and they perform plays, and sometimes they even performed with or for loyalty. Like, for instance, Queen Elizabeth was a fan of this. So here is the recreation of what Blackfriars looked like. So you can see much nicer, even the wood. It's all deep and really, really high end stuff. And here's the Lord Chamberlain's Men performed in the courtyard of the White Hart through this archway in the 1690s. And again, all the world's a stage, famous Shakespeare quote. Spain is also going to get onto this. The first professional theaters will open up in Madrid and Seville in the 1570s, and more would follow, and they would actually even go all the way to Mexico City in the New World. And this was really all about just plays, and more plays. And again, Shakespeare was kind of the guy that is going to inspire a lot of people, but other folks as well are going to be involved. For instance, the most well-known is Lope de Vega, who was a middle-class guy that just was really good at writing plays. And actually, in fact, he wrote over 1,500 plays, which is absurd. And he actually focused on what he thought people wanted. He would talk to people, and his aim wasn't with like other early theater guys. The whole idea was like it's all about the art, and I'm just going to do whatever I want to do and focus on just me as the artist writing it. Whereas Lope de Vega played up to his audience, and it really helped it become a focal point of just Spanish culture at the time. He was actually so important as a playwright that he was asked to write a book on how to write plays, and that's really incredible. His big works were Fuente of The Night from Olmedo, and Punishment and Revenge. A lot of his he does comedy, he does tragedy. You know, he's witty, very charming. A lot of times it was very action packed. But his plays were also known as realistic. Like the situations that the characters would get in are things that like regular people would have to deal with. And so theater becoming, you know, a big part of society. And then we go over into France. Now, France, just like with art, is a little bit later in the era, but again, they're still really big. These playwrights are different. They're writing for the elites, and most of them depend on patronage. It did help them that the kings at that time were using art and architecture to make their reigns famous. And so what the kings do, the nobles do. So these people had great opportunities to work with that. The style here, they focused on like clever humor, not like, you know, belly laugh humor, but very like witty and polished, also not too emotional, a lot of subtleties running through the plays of the French. And a lot of them would take some ideas from the themes of classical Greek and Roman sources and then giving kind of more modern twists at that time on them. And here's a great example of a place, the La Princesse d'Elodie at the theater in Versailles, and this was done by Israel Silvestri in 1664. So again, gives you an idea, and you can see if you look down here, like all the big hats and stuff, so you know everybody that's here to watch that is wealthy. One of the big guys that is doing this was Jean-Baptiste Racine. His most famous work was Phaedra, which is a big tragedy based on Greek mythology, and the story of a stepmother falls in love with her stepson. Her stepson loves someone else. They thought the dad was dead, but he's not, and it's fatalistic. There's lots of betrayal and anger and so many different things going on at this time. And the focuses that Racine really worked with was, you know, looking at conflicts between love and honor, or the idea of inclination and duty, like what you want to do, but what you feel you are like honor bound to do. And it made for really entertaining pictures. And I said they're using Greek and Roman myths, and here's a picture depicting Phaedra, and it was really big time. The other big guy was Jean-Baptiste Poquelin. I said that wrong, but, you know, I had an accent, so it's totally cool. He's also known as Molière. His big play was Tartuffe, but he wrote and produced and even acted in a series of comedies, so very similar to Shakespeare there. He's really big on satire, and he kind of made fun of, like, the religious world and the social world and stuff, you know, which was pretty impressive on that. He actually had his works banned and probably would have gone to jail if not for the fact that King Louis XIV was a big fan of his, and evidently Louis XIV had a little bit of a sense of humor, which kept, you know, this guy out of jail. But what we are looking at here is very clearly art and theater. Theater is growing, art is still there, and this is still a huge part of European society. All right, guys, thanks for listening, and I will see you soon.